Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be dissertating and talking about zodiac signs and coping with death, part 2 of 2. And I'm going to be talking about the signs Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And yes, it does apply and pertain to the sun, moon, and ascendant. So the first sign, Libra, I look at them, they're the most balanced of the signs. They're the type that I believe would take the fair amount of time to for their grieving and the despondency that they go through in terms of their loss. They have a very equitable and fair nature, and they could be a good executor of the will. You understand what I'm saying as far as the will goes, because they could disperse the money out in whatever resources are out very fairly and evenly. And that's the sign really, and also being an air sign, very objective, and they will go through their grieving process. But I look at them, and even in the face of death, I think they would be very as far as rational and objective, I would see them that way as well, as far as the sign Libra goes. Now, with Scorpio, Scorpio has tremendous resiliency, and they're able to bounce back from adversity very strongly. And I think it also pertains to matters connected with death. Now, the Scorpio being a water sign, they could feel very deeply. They don't always like to show their emotion, at least not on the surface, but they have a little bit more emotion than a lot of people can realize, and they could take death very strongly, but they could bounce back from it very strongly as well. And Scorpio doesn't take things really hardly anything lightly, and I think this goes as far as death goes as well. And that's as far as Scorpio goes. Scorpio is the phoenix rising from the ashes. So if anybody can cope and bounce back strongly from matters connected with death, that they can as well. And I think they could deal with it if they are told, say they were in some condition that somebody said because of a diagnosis was perilous. I think it would apply to that, because Scorpio has very indomitable spirit and willpower, and they can deal with this very strongly. Now let's take the sign Sagittarius. Now Sagittarius is a very expansive, optimistic, and upbeat sign. And I'm not saying they're going to joke around when they're in a situation if they're facing death, but what they could do is they could be very reassuring with family members, and say they have a family member that's dying on the threshold of death, or has or has died. They could be willing. They're the kind of people that would accentuate and emphasize the positive things about that person and about the person that they lost through death. And Sagittarius, if they're faced with their own death, I think because of that upbeat attitude, they would be very positive through that whole thing. They can see what's going on, and they understand it, and I think they would. I mean, they're not going to take it lightly necessarily, but but I think they can cope with it better than average, because they have that spirit in them that doesn't really they don't like to become despondent. And if they do, I don't think it's generally not going to last very long. Well, now, as far as the sign Capricorn, we're almost talking about the antithesis to Sagittarius in the despondency respect. Capricorn can be that, I look at that as the melancholy sign. Being an earth sign, it can incline toward despondency and being disconsolate to some degree. And Capricorn is a very serious sign. And say if you had a person that was even very young and was not even, say they weren't even an adult, if they were a child, they would probably take death in a more mature and responsible way than the average kid. And I think it applies to their adulthood as well. And regardless of age, Capricorn is usually more mature and responsible than what their actual age indicates. And they could become very saddened more by death, because an earth sign, and earth signs do incline a little bit toward being melancholy as opposed to the other signs. And I think they take this, Capricorn is very serious, and they would take this matter very seriously, and would do whatever means were necessary in terms of what they have to do as far as the coping process goes. And they do, as far as the grieving. And even though Capricorn can come across as undemonstrative, they have their emotions. If something of a serious nature happens, they will be impacted up by it, and maybe more than what they're actually showing. Now, as far as Aquarius goes, well, Aquarius being an air sign, they could come across as somewhat detached emotionally, but Aquarius is very selfless, and they have a humanitarian way about them, and they could be very giving in death of a loved one, and they could be the kind of person that would be willing to give their resources, what they can do to pay for expenses of someone that has died. They could be that person that could act as that friend, not just a family member to somebody, but act as that friend as well, and be there for support, whether it's emotional or what have you. And this is a person, even and somebody that Aquarius is about being, is often like that universal friend. And I think even that if something impacted one of their friends, they may take it stronger than the average person, because friendship it can be such a dominant part of the Aquarius way of being in their lives, maybe more prominently than the other signs. So that's something to look at as well, as far as Aquarius goes. Now, last but not least, the sign Pisces. Well, Pisces, being a water sign, Pisces can be very exceptionally sensitive, and Pisces emotions can be sometimes all-encompassing. And this is something where as far as a person dying, they might not always deal with it well because of their strong emotions, but none can really undoubt the Pisces side as far as their compassion goes, and as far as the feeling nature of this sign. So this is someone that may take something like death a little bit harder than the average sign, but they're also that person that is very well-meaning and would be there to console family members or close friends in someone's, as far as the death of someone goes. And don't forget that Pisces is co-ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is that expansive planet, and Pisces can be idealistic and try to see and emphasize the positive of a loved one, as far as loved one dying, and looking at the positive, even in maybe facing their own death, where the average person might not always be able to do that. Well, anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for zodiac signs and coping with death part 2. And stay tuned next time, where I'll be continuing my Sun Ascendant sign combination series. 2 things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.